"I'm starving for a man," said the giant Zulu girl to the Virgin. Lumberjack snow creaked beneath his boots like an old voice breaking. The wind came off the timberline, thin and bitter, carrying the smell of sap and iron. Matthew Thorne had been working the northern cut for 73 days without rest, his body moving like a machine carved from the same pine he felled. The camp around him slept under frost, shacks buried to their eaves, a saw pit smoldering faintly, and the faint glint of tools half buried in snowdrift. His breath came in clouds. He'd forgotten the shape of warmth. He swung his axe one last time before dusk closed, the blade biting deep, the sound dull and heavy in the air. The tree leaned, moaned, and broke apart with the sigh of old wood surrendering. When it fell, silence followed, long, brittle, and echoing through the valley. He stood still, feeling his heart beat slow against his ribs. The men in camp called him the Virgin. It was not cruelty, not exactly, just the frontier's way of mocking anyone untouched by sin or by flesh. He'd come north alone, carrying no story, no kin, and no woman. Work was his refuge, his ritual. In the nights he read scripture by firelight, though he no longer believed it promised anything beyond endurance. The forest had taken everything soft from him. His hands were cracked to blood, his shoulders bowed with the weight of the yoke he'd chosen. Yet some hunger, buried deep, kept him awake long after the others slept. A quiet ache that rose when he stared into the frozen dark and wondered what warmth felt like against skin. It was on a morning of thin sun and hollow wind that he saw her. She came from the tree line, like a vision cut from another world, tall, shoulders broad as an ox's, her dark skin glowing blue beneath the frost. Her hair was bound in cloth, her step steady, though she wore no boots. She carried a sack over one shoulder, the weight shifting with each stride. The men stopped what they were doing. Axes froze mid-swing. Someone muttered, "Christ above!" She didn't flinch. Her eyes were sharp, calm, ancient in their composure. She moved as though she'd walked through hell to get here, and maybe she had. Matthew stood near the pile of logs, the sawdust dusting his coat. She looked at him once, just once, and something inside him lurched, like the earth shifting under ice. She said nothing until she reached the campfire where the foreman, Doyle, sat nursing his tin mug. "I need work," she said. Her voice carried through the cold like a drumbeat. Doyle stared, speechless. The men laughed nervously, whispering words they thought she couldn't hear. But Matthew did not laugh. He saw the frost on her eyelashes, the tremor in her fingers. Hunger was written all over her. "You, from the trading post?" Doyle asked, half in disbelief. She shook her head. "No post would take me." "What's your name, then?" She hesitated. "Namusa." No one spoke. The name hung there, unfamiliar and strong. Doyle spat. "No women here. Not safe, not fit. I can work," she said. "You'll see." He shook his head, but she didn't move. The men watched. Even the wind seemed to still. Matthew stepped forward. He didn't know why, just that something in her steadiness called to him, something that reached past language. "Let her stay the night," he said quietly. "We've spare boards." "The storm's close." Doyle glared at him. "You speak out of turn, preacher boy." "She won't last a mile in that wind," Matthew said. The silence grew taut. Finally Doyle grunted. "Fine, one night. She sleeps in the store shed. You watch her, Thorne. Your idea, your burden." She nodded once, wordless thanks flickering across her face, and walked toward the shed without looking back. That night the wind screamed across the ridge. Matthew couldn't sleep. He lay staring at the rafters, listening to the storm claw at the walls. The thought of her alone in that unheated shack needled him until he rose, wrapped his coat around his shoulders, and stepped into the blizzard. Snow bit his face, hard as salt. The shed door rattled under his hand. Inside she sat against the wall, knees drawn up, eyes open. "You'll freeze," he said. She smiled faintly. "I've known colder." He took off his gloves, held out a blanket. "You shouldn't have come here." "I didn't come to die," she said. "I came to live." He knelt, the lantern flickering between them. "There's nothing here but work." "And men who believe that's enough," she said, her gaze unflinching. "But you're not like them." He felt heat rise in his chest, a strange mix of shame and longing. "You don't know me." "I know hunger when I see it." For a moment the wind outside fell silent. He couldn't find words. The light trembled over her face, strong lines, frost melting on her brow. Something fierce, almost sacred, radiated from her. He turned away first. Get some sleep, but he didn't leave. He sat by the door until dawn broke, his breath misting in the cold, her quiet presence filling the space between them like a secret neither dared name. When morning came, she was already outside splitting kindling. Doyle swore when he saw. The men gathered, watching as her axe fell clean, rhythm perfect, muscles tightening with each swing. By noon, no one laughed anymore, and by dusk, Doyle gave her a cut of the wages. 1 day's pay, he said gruffly. You last the week. You'll get more, she nodded, not smiling. I will. Matthew watched her from the edge of camp, the wind tugging his coat. Something inside him shifted that day. Not a crack, but the beginning of one. That night, the firelight cast long shadows. The men's talk was quieter than usual. Namusa sat apart, mending a torn glove with thread she'd brought from wherever she came. Her voice rose once in song, low, steady, mournful. None understood the words, but all felt them. Matthew's chest ached listening. He looked into the flames and saw his own loneliness mirrored there, fierce and undeniable. He didn't touch her hand until the third night. It was after a fight broke out between Doyle and a drunk Sawyer. The camp was chaos. Shouting, blood on snow, the smell of whiskey and iron. Matthew dragged the man off, knuckles split, lip bleeding. When it ended, he walked out past the logs into the frozen quiet. She followed. You shouldn't bleed for them, she said. He laughed, breath white in the dark. You shouldn't be here at all. Then why do you look at me like that? He had no answer. She stepped closer, her breath warm on his cheek, eyes steady. Because I'm starving, she whispered. For a man who remembers what warmth is, he froze. The world around them held its breath. I'm no man for you, he said, voice rough. I've nothing to give. You have fire, she said simply. That's enough. When she kissed him, it wasn't soft. It was hunger, meeting hunger, the collision of two worlds too weary to pretend any more. The snow kept falling. Somewhere far off an owl called. They didn't speak of it after. The days returned to labor, the grind of saw and frost and silence. But something between them burned quiet and steady. Rumors stirred in camp. Eyes watched. Doyle's jaw grew tighter. Matthew tried to bury it under work. But each night, when the fire died low, his thoughts drifted back to her face, the way her breath clouded the air between them. The frontier had its own law, unwritten but brutal. A man could break bone, lie, steal, so long as he never crossed certain lines. He knew they'd come for her eventually. He just didn't know when. It happened 3 nights later. Beneath a sky cracked open with northern light. The men had finished their whiskey, laughter turning coarse. Doyle's voice rose above the others, mean and loud. You see her there, boys? The preacher's girl? He's keeping her warm for Jesus. Laughter rippled, jagged and ugly. Namusa didn't look up. She kept mending rope by the fire, her back straight, her face calm. Matthew stood slowly, his hands curling into fists. That's enough, Doyle smirked, rising too. Or what? You'll pray me quiet? The camp fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Matthew moved first. The punch landed square on Doyle's jaw, sending him sprawling into the snow. The men shouted, circling close, their breath fogging the air. Doyle rose, bleeding and grinning. You just bought her trouble, boy. Matthew didn't answer. His chest heaved, his breath harsh. Namusa's eyes met his across the fire, steady, sorrowful, proud. She stood then, gathering her sack. I'll go, she said quietly. No, Matthew said, turning to her. You don't have to. Doyle spat blood into the snow. Let her. She's poison. You'll see. Namusa's gaze lingered on Matthew, then she turned toward the forest, walking into the dark without another word. He followed her tracks long after the others had gone back to drink. The moon hung cold above the trees, her footprints small but deep. He found her near the river, standing beside the frozen water, her breath visible in the pale light. You should have stayed, he said. You should have let me leave sooner, she replied. Men like them don't forgive. And you? You're too clean to live dirty. He shook his head. You think I care what they say? They'll make you pay. Let them. The ice cracked somewhere in the dark. He stepped closer. Where will you go? She looked out across the snow. South, maybe. There's a logging camp near the bay. They'll take anyone with hands. He reached for her arm, stopping her. Namusa, her name came out like a prayer. She turned, eyes glistening. I can't let you vanish, he said. Not into that cold. You can't stop me, Matthew Thorne. His hand dropped. The world felt smaller then. Two people framed by endless white, both too proud to yield. Then let me walk with you, he said. She hesitated. Why? Because I'd rather freeze beside you than breathe alone. For the first time she smiled, not wide but true. You talk like a man who's never lost everything. Then teach me what that means. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. They walked until dawn. The forest grew quiet, snow falling soft and steady. When the light came, pale and thin, they stopped beneath a stand of black spruce. The world smelled of resin and iron. He built a small fire while she unpacked dried meat from her sack. They ate in silence, the flames painting gold on their faces. After a while she said, back home, a man's worth was measured by his endurance, how much he could bear before he broke. Here, it seems you measure worth by how little you feel. He looked at her. Feeling gets you killed out here, maybe, she said. But it also keeps you human, he didn't answer. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the gray light. They walked another day, following the frozen rivers south. Wolves trailed them at a distance, thin shapes in the trees. Once, when the sun sank low, they found a half-collapsed trapper's cabin. Inside, the air smelled of rot and smoke. He cleared the corner, laid down his coat. You'll sleep. I'll keep watch. You'll freeze, she said. I've known colder, he murmured, echoing her words. That night, neither slept. The wind howled against the walls, shaking loose snow from the roof. She sat across from him, the firelight flickering across her face. You believe in God? She asked suddenly. I used to. And now? He stared into the flames. Now I believe in work. And in winter, she smiled faintly. Work won't save you. Nothing saves anyone out here. Her eyes softened. Then maybe that's what we have in common. The words hung there, slow and quiet. He reached across the space between them, fingers brushing hers. Her skin was warm, rough from labor, real. When she leaned forward, their foreheads touched. The silence around them deepened until only the sound of their breathing remained. They didn't speak again until morning. When he woke, the fire was out and she was gone. For a moment, panic clawed his chest. He ran outside, the snow untouched, her tracks faint but visible, leading toward the river. He followed them, calling her name into the wind. He found her near the bank, kneeling. She wasn't praying. She was washing something from her hands. Blood. What happened? He said, kneeling beside her. Wolf, she said quietly. It followed us too close. He saw then, the carcass not far off, a knife buried deep in its neck. You killed it. I had to. He looked at her, awe mixing with fear. You shouldn't have gone alone. She met his eyes. I didn't need saving, he nodded slowly. I know. For the first time he realized just how strong she was, not in body alone, but in will. A kind of strength the frontier hadn't yet taught him. They buried the wolf under snow, wordless. When they rose, the wind carried a new sound. Axes, distant, rhythmic. The bay camp, she said. He frowned. If it's the one I think, they'll turn you away. Then we'll see who turns who, she said. He followed. By evening they reached the new camp, a cluster of rough cabins, smoke curling from chimneys. Men looked up as they approached, their faces hard, eyes narrow. A foreman stepped forward, coat heavy with fur. We don't take drifters, Namusa met his gaze. I'm no drifter. I work, he laughed. Not my kind of work, Matthew stepped beside her. She's stronger than half your crew, the man sneered. You vouch for her, boy? I do, the foreman's grin widened. Then her pay's yours if she quits. Or dies. So be it, Matthew said. Namusa looked at him, something like gratitude hidden behind the steel of her stare. They were given a corner of a bunkhouse, no fire, no privacy. But it was shelter, and in the days that followed, she proved herself again, felling timber, hauling chains, binding logs with a rhythm that made men stare in silence. Matthew worked beside her, their breaths visible in the cold. No one dared mock her now. Still, whispers lingered. At night, when they lay side by side in the dark, Her voice came quiet. "You'd give your name for me." He turned toward her. "I already did," she smiled faintly. "Then you'll bear my trouble. I'll bear whatever comes." Her fingers brushed his. "You don't know what that means yet," he wanted to answer. But the words wouldn't come, because somewhere deep, he feared she was right. Snow thickened over the bay camp, softening the rough edges of cabins and stacked logs. The air smelled of pitch, sweat, and brine from the unseen water beyond the tree line. Days blurred into one another, a grind of work, meals, and sleep so thin it barely counted as rest. Matthew rose before dawn, hands numb, shoulders stiff. Namusa woke with him, her breath visible in the dark of the bunkhouse. The other men turned away when she moved, pretending not to watch, pretending not to care. But he felt their eyes like splinters. In the forest, sound ruled. The deep thunk of axes, the shriek of saws, the crack and thunder of falling timber. Namusa moved among it all like she'd been born to the rhythm. Her size, once a curiosity, became an advantage. She carried heavier chains, dragged thicker logs, stayed on her feet longer when others wore down. At midday, she stripped off her outer coat, sweat steaming from her neck in the cold. One of the men, a sharp-faced sawyer named Kemp, stared too long. "Never seen skin like that on a giant," he muttered. Another elbowed him, "and never will again." "She'll break you in half," Kemp grinned, mean and thin. "Maybe I'd like that." Matthew heard every word. His grip tightened on the peavy handle until his knuckles whitened. But he didn't turn, not yet. This camp had its own order. You chose each fight carefully, because each one cost you something. Namusa heard them too. He knew she did. Her jaw tightened, but her stroke never faltered. The log rolled clean. The chains bit true. She didn't give them the satisfaction of looking their way. That night, storms moved in from the bay. Snow blew sideways. The bunkhouse shook. Men crowded near the stove, boots off, feet steaming and stinking. The talk rose, rough as the wind. "Foreman's a fool taking her on," someone said. Another voice, low and bitter, answered. "Fool's the man who lies with her. Mark my words." Matthew sat on his bunk, mending a busted strap, ears burning. Namusa lay on the far side, back to the wall, eyes open in the dark. Kemp leaned against the stove, bottle in hand. "You see how she looks at him?" He laughed. "Like he's the last tree in the valley. Maybe she'll climb him." Laughter followed, ugly and sharp. Matthew stood. The strap fell from his hands, unfinished. He stepped into the glow of the stove. His face was calm, voice even. "You're drunk, Kemp. Go to bed." Kemp's eyes glittered. "Or what, preacher?" "Or you'll wish you had." The bunkhouse fell silent. Even the wind seemed farther away. Kemp took a slow step forward, the bottle swinging at his side. "I hear you left one camp already," he said. "Over a woman. You want to ruin this one too?" Matthew's jaw flexed. "I'm just telling you to shut your mouth," Kemp grinned. "You want me quiet? Take my job. Stand on the log drive with her. See how long you last." The bay eats saints for breakfast. Foreman Havelock, who'd been silent at the table, finally spoke. His voice was gravel. "He's right about one thing. Tomorrow, Thorne, you're on the river with the giant." Namusa turned her head slightly at the word, but said nothing. Matthew held Havelock's gaze. "You'll pair us on a drive this early?" "Ice is thick. You vouch for her body," Havelock said. "You vouch for her work. Now you'll vouch with your neck. Both of you, at the choke point. Logs jam there. We lose a fortnight's cutting?" Kemp laughed softly. "Hear that? You die together or live together. Romantic as scripture." Havelock's eyes narrowed. "One more word, Kemp, and I'll feed you to that bay myself." The bunkhouse quieted again. Men crawled into their beds, the air thick with smoke and unspoken thoughts. Later, when the lanterns went out and the room turned to shadow, Matthew lay listening to the storm. Creak of beams, soft groan of settling snow, the slow breathing of exhausted men. Namusa's whisper came across the dark like a low drum. "You should not have spoken for me." He rolled onto his side, facing her silhouette against the faint window light. "Then who would?" "I have carried myself farther than any man," she said. "I did not ask you to carry me." "You didn't have to," he replied quietly. "I can't stand and watch them cut you down." Her voice softened. "If you stand with me on that river tomorrow, they may cut you instead." "So be it," he said. Silence stretched between them, deep and fragile. Snow tapped lightly against the window. "You think this is love," she murmured. "But you don't know my hunger," he swallowed. "No, then tell me," her breath caught just once. "Back home, before the war, I was promised to a man, strong, proud. He promised me land, cattle, children. Then the redcoats came. They burned the fields. They took him. They left nothing standing but me." His chest ached. "I'm sorry," she shook her head in the dark. "I ran, walked, sailed in the belly of a ship smelling of fear and sickness. I came north because it was the furthest from home I could imagine, the furthest from that fire. I'm starving, Matthew, not just for a man, for a life where I am not taken." He let the words settle. "I won't take you," he said. "Not like that, I know," she whispered. "That is why I am afraid," he frowned. "Afraid of me?" "No," she said. "Afraid of how much I could want you." He lay awake a long time after her breathing slowed into a restless sleep. His own hunger burned, but not just in his body, in his chest. In the empty places he'd filled with work and scripture and winter. The river waited for them at dawn. The sky was an iron plate. Breath froze as it left their lips. The bay's edge creaked under the weight of broken ice, and timber pressed hard by the current. Log drives were ugly, mean work, men balancing on slick wood, pike poles in hand, moving with the flow to break jams before they crushed the whole run. One mistake, and you went under, pinned and ground to bone beneath 1,000 tons of tree. Havelock pointed downriver, where the flow narrowed between two black rock shoulders. "There's your choke point." She takes the pike. "You take the hooks. You keep that line moving, or you don't come back." Namusa took the pike pole without hesitation. The long shaft looked almost natural in her hands. Matthew strapped on spiked boots, feeling the weight of every eye on them. Kemp watched from the bank, smirk twisting his thin mouth. "Try not to drown," he called softly. Matthew ignored him. He stepped onto the first log. It rolled under his weight, slick with ice. His boots bit. Namusa followed, her balance sure, her size giving her leverage against the shifting river of wood. The current tugged at them. Logs bumped and groaned. The sound thudded through his legs, through his spine, until his whole body vibrated with it. They moved in careful rhythm. He called, she responded. She braced, he swung. Together they nudged snarls apart, sending the wood grinding forward through the narrowed throat of the river. "Left!" he shouted once. She shifted, drove her pole deep, and a log spun free. Narrowly missing his knees, he laughed short and surprised. "You'll learn quick," she grunted, breath freezing in tiny crystals. "River wants to kill us." "I'm listening." Hours passed. The sky stayed low and gray. With each jam, the danger grew. For them, for the men waiting downstream, for the camp depending on this load to feed the sawmill. Then it happened. The whole river seemed to seize. Logs locked tight, grinding, the pressure building in a long, deep groan that shook the air. A true jam. Matthew felt it through the soles of his boots, a buried thunder. "We have to break it," he shouted. Now Namusa eyed the tangle ahead, timber piled atop timber, one massive log wedged crosswise near the middle. "That one," she said, pointing. "It holds the rest," he nodded. "If we shift it, the whole line will move." "Or crush us," she replied calmly. He met her gaze. "We'll be quick." They picked their way across the piled logs, each step a risk. The current sluiced between cracks, black and furious. He could feel the strain in the wood beneath him. "Like a bow pulled too far." "On my mark," he said. Hooking his peavey into the key log, Namusa set her pike at the other end. Muscles coiling. 1, 2, now. They heaved. The log resisted, screamed, then lurched. Everything exploded. The jam shattered with a roar like mountains breaking. Log surged, rearing and plunging. He heard men shouting on the banks, faint and useless. The log under Matthew's feet jumped. He went down hard, chest slamming wood, breath driven out. The world turned into a chaos of rolling timber and spray. He saw Namusa thrown sideways, arms pinwheeling. Her pike pole vanished. She landed on her back across two shifting logs, her body half split over the gap. "Namusa!" he bellowed, voice ripped away by the din. She tried to move, but the logs beneath her rolled opposite directions. Her legs spread wider, perilously near the grinding crush of converging wood. The river waited below, dark and hungry. Matthew scrambled toward her, boots scraping, legs burning. A log slammed into his hip, nearly knocking him into the water, but he clung on, dragging himself forward. Her eyes found his. There was fear there at last. Real, sharp fear. "Move," he shouted. "Bring your knees in." "I can't," she gasped. "They'll break me." The logs rolled again, and she cried out, a raw, torn sound that twisted his gut. He saw it then, clear as scripture. If nothing changed, the next roll would crush her pelvis, grind bone against wood until there was nothing left but ruin. Without thinking, he threw himself across the gap, driving his body between her thighs, bracing his boots on one log and his shoulders against the other. He became the wedge holding them apart. Pain exploded through his ribs and back. The logs tried to close, the full weight of the river pressing down. He screamed, smelling pine sap and his own sweat. She stared at him, horror and shock tangled in her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Buying you time," he panted. "Move! Now!" Tears froze at the corners of her lashes. "Matthew, move!" he roared. She twisted, using him as a brace, hauling her legs up and over his body. The motion tore his back across the rough bark. His hip popped with a sickening jolt. She rolled free onto a more stable log, catching herself on hands and knees. He felt the timber beneath him shift again. The pressure doubled, bright explosions stabbing through his spine. His vision narrowed. The sky flickered gray and white. "Matthew," she shouted, "give me your hand." He tried to move, but the logs clamped tighter around him, pinning him in place like the joint of a broken hinge. His breath came in shallow gasps. "Go," he croaked. "Get clear!" "No," her voice was iron. "I won't leave you." Another surge in the river pressed the logs again. His ribs shrieked. Something cracked. Dark spots danced before his eyes. She crawled closer, hand reaching. "Take it!" He looked up at her, at the woman he'd followed into cold and trouble and strange hunger. Shame and love tore at him equal and sharp. "I can't," he whispered. "They've got me." Her jaw clenched. She looked at the banks, at the men shouting helplessly, at Havelock swearing into the wind. No rope reached them. No pole could pry him loose without sending him under. She looked back at him. "Listen to me," she said, voice low, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You are not dying here," he laughed weakly. "Not your choice." "Wrong," she said. "You gave me your life when you climbed onto this river. You gave me your body when you took my weight. Now I decide what that gift becomes." Her eyes swept the jam, quick and calculating. She saw, as she had before, the patterns of force and weight, the language of timber and water. "There," she said. "Under your left boot." "That log is pushing the others. If I shift it, they'll loosen." "It'll throw you," he rasped. "Then catch me in your prayers," she answered. She moved before he could protest. She crawled past him, every inch a risk, and planted herself atop the angled log pressing into the others. She jammed her hands against nearby trunks, bracing her powerful legs. Then she pushed. He saw her muscles bunch, saw her teeth bare in a snarl. The log resisted, the river protesting with a deep, grinding moan. She screamed then, a sound ripped from somewhere primal, and the wood beneath her feet finally shifted. The change was instant. Pressure lifted from his ribs, boots, back. The logs rolled, but looser now, the jam breaking evenly. "Move!" she shouted. "Get up!" He forced his numb limbs to obey, dragging himself free as the gap beneath him widened into a torrent. A log slammed into his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He slid, scrambling, boots scraping desperately for purchase. Namusa lunged, catching his coat with one hand. Her grip was iron. With a grunt she hauled him toward her, muscles screaming as she fought both his weight and the rolling wood beneath them. He collapsed against her, chest heaving, pain radiating from his side. The river surged, broken jam rushing past them toward the bay. They clung together in the middle of a shifting, spinning world of timber and ice. Men on the banks cheered wildly, relief and disbelief mixing in their voices. Havelock's shout cut through it all. "Get off that river now!" They picked their way toward shore, moving slow, careful, every step a negotiation between balance and pain. By the time they reached solid ground, Matthew's legs trembled, his breath ragged. Namusa's hands bled from splinters. Kemp stared at them, mouth hanging open. "You should be dead," he muttered. Namusa looked at him, eyes hard as frozen iron. So should a man who talks more than he works. Havelock stepped forward, gaze sweeping over them. "No one speaks against them again," he said quietly. "They just saved this camp a month's labor. And his life," he jerked his head at Matthew. "Get him to the infirmary." Namusa slipped under Matthew's arm, taking most of his weight. He hissed when her hand brushed his ribs. "Sorry," she murmured. He grimaced. "Don't be. Pain means I'm not under those logs." As they walked toward the cabin where a half-trained medic waited with whiskey and bandages, he leaned closer. "You could have left me," he whispered. She didn't look at him. "I told you before," she said, voice steady. "I am starving for a man who remembers warmth. I will not let the river take him before I've had my fill." His heartbeat stumbled. "You speak like I'm food," she smiled faintly. "We are all food. For fire. For winter. For time. I am just greedy enough to want my share before the cold eats us." The infirmary was little more than a corner of a cabin. Cot, table, smell of spirits and old blood. Namusa helped him onto the bed, her hand surprisingly gentle for someone who could wrestle timber. The medic, a small man with nervous eyes, prodded Matthew's ribs. He winced and swore under his breath. "2 cracked, maybe 3, the medic said. "Hips bruised, not broken." "You're lucky," Namusa snorted softly. Luck had nothing to do with it. The medic glanced at her, then looked away quickly. "He needs rest. No river work for at least a fortnight. Maybe more." Havelock appeared in the doorway, snow still clinging to his coat. "Fortnight?" The medic shrugged helplessly. "You put him back sooner, he'll break." "Then you lose him for good," Havelock grunted. "Fine. He can do ledger work, tallies, letters. Camp's got a pile of figures no one even pretends to understand." Matthew tried to sit up. "I can still swing an axe. Just give me—" Namusa's hand pressed his shoulder down. Firm. "You will rest." He met her gaze, saw no give in it, and exhaled. "Rest," he muttered. "Feels like being buried alive." "Better buried in blankets than under logs," she replied. Havelock watched the exchange. Something thoughtful flickering behind his eyes. "Namusa," he said slowly. She straightened. "Yes, you stay on the drive," he said. "You hear me? You just proved you understand that river better than most men who've drowned in it. Damp down the jams, watch the narrows. You get first cut of the river wages from now on." Kemp's voice drifted from outside. "You're giving the giant river pay?" Havelock's reply cracked like a whip. "I'm giving the only person who saved your salary today whatever share I damn well please." Namusa nodded once. "I will keep the river moving." He held her gaze. "And you keep him breathing." She looked at Matthew, then back. "I will." Days passed. Matthew healed slowly, frustration gnawing at him like a rat. He hated lying on the cot while others worked. Hated watching through the window as Namusa walked down to the river each dawn, pike across her shoulders like a soldier's rifle. In the evenings, when the men drifted toward the bunkhouse or the small mess cabin, she came to him. Sometimes she brought bread, sometimes strips of smoked fish, sometimes nothing but her quiet presence. "Tell me of your home," she said once, sitting on the edge of the cot. He swallowed a wince as he shifted. "There's not much to tell. Small farm, thin soil. Father drank. Mother prayed. They both thought the world would be better when I was gone." "Why?" "Because I kept asking why," he said with a faint smile. "Why God made some fields rich and ours poor. Why some men beat their wives and others didn't. Why it felt like sin just to want something better. And what did they say?" "Work harder," he answered. "Or pray more," she nodded slowly. Back home they would have said the same. Different gods. Same answers. He looked at her hands, at the calluses new and old. "Do you miss it?" "Your land." Her eyes went far away. "I miss the heat. The smell of dust and cattle and rain on hard ground. I miss voices that know my tongue. But when I sleep, I still see fire, and the shapes of men with guns walking through it. Home became a graveyard. There's nothing there for me." His chest tightened. "You have nothing left?" She shook her head. "I have myself," he nodded. "You'll never lose that," she smiled faintly. "You say that like you've never watched a man lose himself one drink at a time." He looked away. "Not all losses come with a bottle." She studied him. "What did you lose?" He exhaled slowly. "Belief, certainty, the notion that the world made sense if you just obeyed enough rules." "And what did you find?" His gaze drifted to the small window, where snowflakes traced faint patterns on the glass. "Work, winter, you." Her throat moved, a small flicker of emotion. You speak as though I am a season. You are, he said. You came like a storm, and I'm still trying to understand the weather. She laughed softly, the sound warming the cold little room. Then listen to it. It does not ask your permission to blow. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, fingers wrapping around his. Why did you say that on the river? He asked quietly. About having your fill of me. Her eyes darkened, but she didn't look away. Because it is true. I am tired of being hungry. For food, for safety, for touch. I am tired of lying awake and feeling my own skin like a stranger's. You are the first man since the war who has looked at me like I am not a possession, not a curse, not a curiosity. I want that. I want you entirely. Heat rose in his face. His fingers tightened unconsciously. I don't know how to be entirely anything. She tilted her head, studying him. Then we will learn together. He swallowed. The men talk. They always will, she said. Let them. Their words do not break ribs or save lives. They just chase their own fear around their mouths. He smiled despite himself. You make it sound simple. It is not simple, she said. It is just worth the complication. Something shifted in him then, subtle but deep. He had spent so long avoiding the pull of others, fearing that wanting anything would bind him like a chain. But here he was, broken and bandaged, staring at a woman who had lost more than he could imagine. And she sat before him still willing to want, he realized with a jolt. How cowardly his fear looked beside her courage when he could stand again without his vision narrowing. Havelock gave him a place at a rough table near the storehouse. Ledgers lay stacked high, numbers crawling across the pages like an ant swarm. Your hand's cleaner than most, Havelock grunted. You keep track of days worked, loads moved, food consumed? We've been guessing until now. Matthew bent over the ink and paper, muscles complaining. It wasn't work that satisfied his body, but it occupied his mind. He tracked tally marks, wages, debts, rations. He began to see the bones of the camp laid bare, its poverty and its profit. He saw something else too, deductions, fines, extra charges sneaked into lines where no one would look. Men paying for broken tools they'd never handled, for whiskey they hadn't drunk, for board they hadn't used. The camp store took more than its due. Havelock skimmed, and above all, the company somewhere far south fattened off every cut of wood these men bled for. One evening, as lamplight turned the ink to dull shine, Namusa came to his table. She watched him work in silence a while, her presence a quiet shield between him and the chill drafting through the boards. Finally she said, "You frown like you've been cheated." He tapped the ledger with his finger. "We all have." She leaned closer, reading slowly. He had been teaching her letters at night, drawing them in the frost on the window, in dust on the floor. Her brow furrowed as she traced the lines. "This is my name," she said, pointing. "Namusa," he nodded. "And this is your wage." She read the number, lips moving. "It is less than what Havelock said." "It is less than what you earned," he replied. Their eyes met. "How many?" she asked quietly. "Most," he said. "Maybe all," she straightened, jaw tightening. "This is theft." "It's the frontier," he answered bitterly. "Rules bend for the men who hold the books, and break for the ones who swing the axes," she murmured. He closed the ledger with a soft thud. "If the men knew, they would burn this camp down," she finished. His heart beat faster. "They might?" She watched him carefully. "What do you want to do?" He looked at the closed book, at his hands, at the door beyond which men laughed, played cards, drank away what little they thought they'd earned. "I don't know," he admitted. "I swore once I'd never break another man's livelihood, even if that man was robbing me. Judgment belongs to God, that's what they taught me. And what do you believe now?" He let out a long, slow breath. "That God's hand is slow in the timberlands, and a man can starve while heaven thinks," Namusa nodded. "Back home, when a chief took more than his share, he lost his people. Sometimes he lost his tongue. The law of hunger answered the law of power." "There is no law here but profit," Matthew said. She studied him, eyes thoughtful. "Maybe we give this camp a different law." He looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Show them," she said simply. "Let them see what you see. The numbers, the theft, the weight of their work stealing food from their mouths." "That would start a war," he whispered. Her jaw flexed. The war has already started. It just runs one way now. He closed his eyes briefly. He could almost hear his mother's voice, thin with fear. Don't stir trouble, Matthew. Don't shake the walls. They fall on us first. He opened them again to Namusa's steady gaze. I'm not a leader, he said. You led when you stepped on that river with me, she replied. You led when you stood between me and Doyle, when you braced your body between those logs. Men follow what bleeds for them, he stared at her, feeling the weight of her words like fresh snow on branches already bowed. If I do this, he said slowly, there's no going back. There was no going back, she answered softly, the day you walked away from that first camp with me. Something inside him settled then. Not like peace exactly, but like a decision finally made after a long argument with himself. Help me, he said. We'll copy the tallies, quietly. We'll show the men when we're ready. She nodded once. I will learn these numbers. I will carry them in my head if the pages burn. He almost smiled. You'd memorize this whole book? I have carried worse burdens, she said. They worked in secret. Nights grew longer as winter deepened. While men snored and cursed in their sleep, Matthew and Namusa hunched over the ledger by lantern light. He taught her to read each symbol, each curve of ink. She repeated the totals softly, committing them to memory with a discipline born from survival. Snow piled against the cabin walls. Ice thickened on the river. Food grew scarcer, meat leaner. The men's faces hollowed, their tempers frayed like old rope. Suspicion, like frost, crept slowly. Kemp watched them too often. His eyes narrowed whenever he saw them together over the books. One evening, as Matthew blew out the lantern, Kemp's shadow filled the doorway. Working late, preacher, Kemp drawled. Helping the giant count her blessings? Namusa straightened, shoulders rolling back. Matthew slid the ledger into a sack. Just keeping the books honest, he said evenly. Kemp's grin was all teeth. Honesty's a luxury out here. Only thing that matters is who's still breathing when the thaw comes. His gaze flicked to the sack, then back. You careful, Thorne. Men who dig too deep in other people's dirt tend to vanish. Namusa stepped forward, placing herself subtly between Matthew and Kemp. Do your words come with actions, she asked calmly, or are they all smoke? Kemp's grin faltered, just a hair. Careful, giant. I've felled bigger trunks than you, she tilted her head, but none that fought back. For a heartbeat, the air turned thinner, cold, needle-sharp. Then Kemp chuckled and stepped aside. Get your rest. River's hungry come thaw. I'd hate for you to disappoint it. When he was gone, Matthew let out a breath he hadn't known he held. He knows, he said. Namusa nodded slowly. He suspects? There is a difference. Does it matter? Yes, she said. Suspicion can be turned. Proof cannot. We must be ready before we show them. How many men do you think will listen? She glanced toward the bunkhouse where rough voices rose, muffled by snow and distance. Hungry ones? Tired ones? Those who send money south to families and see nothing come back. Enough, he swallowed. And if they turn on us instead? She met his eyes. Then we stand as we have stood in river and forest, back to back, facing whatever comes. He nodded, feeling the old fear and the new resolve twist together inside him. Days edged toward the thaw. The first drip of melting ice fell from the eaves. The air shifted, a subtle softening beneath the cold. With it came restlessness in the camp, a stirring of men eager for spring wages, for travel, for anything but the endless white. It was Havelock who forced their hand. He burst into the ledger cabin one afternoon, face flushed from wind and fury. Thorne, he snapped. Explain this. He slapped a letter onto the table. The paper bore the distant company's seal, smudged and grand. Matthew read quickly. His stomach tightened. Reduction in supplies, increased deductions to cover losses at the bay. No extra wages for the winter drive. A formal thanks for their sacrifice. Havelock paced, coat flaring. They're bleeding us dry. Us, them, everyone. Men will riot when they learn. And they'll blame me, Matthew looked up slowly. Maybe they should. Havelock stopped dead. Careful, boy. Namusa stepped from the corner where she'd been sorting tally sticks. The numbers don't lie, she said. You take more than your share as well. Her voice was calm, but something in it cut deep. Havelock's gaze snapped to her. You accusing me in my own camp? In your camp? she echoed. You own this land? This cold? These men? I run this place, he growled. They answer to me. And you answer to them, Matthew said quietly. Or you answer to no one, and this becomes a prison with axes. Havelock's fist crashed onto the table. Ink jumped, spattering the letter. You think you know what it costs to keep this hell running? He snarled. You think food just appears? Tools, nails, whiskey to keep them from cutting each other's throats? I take my cut because if I don't, I freeze same as them. Namusa's gaze did not waver. We all freeze, Havelock. That is the only fair thing about this place. Matthew opened the ledger, hand steady. He turned it toward Havelock, tapping the columns. I've tallied every cost, he said. Tools, food, repairs. I've calculated what would be fair. What would still leave profit for the company? What would feed these men and their families without starving you? The difference between that and these numbers is theft. Havelock stared at the ink like it was blood. You showed this to anyone? He asked, voice suddenly low. Not yet, Matthew said. Then you burn it, Havelock said. Now you forget these sums. You keep your head down, you work. You live. Namusa stepped closer, shoulders filling the small room. No, Havelock's eyes flicked between them. You think those men will thank you? He hissed. You think they'll spare you when they learn how long this has gone on? They'll hang me from a tree and they will not care who brought them the rope. You will be next for putting it in their hands. Matthew felt his pulse pounding in his temples. I won't be part of this lie anymore. Then you're a bigger fool than I thought. Havelock lunged for the ledger. Namusa moved first. Her hand closed around his wrist, all that river and timber strength behind it. Havelock froze, face flushing with pain and rage. Let me go, he snarled. Listen, she said, voice calm but unyielding. You are right. They will hang you if we show them. But we will not show them alone. You will stand with us. You will admit your part. You will offer them a different share, a better one, enough to cool their anger. Why would I do that? He spat. Because winter ends, she said. And when it ends, men leave. News travels. There are other camps, other foremen. You stand with them now, you might keep this one. You stand against them, you will not live to see another. Havelock stared at her, breathing hard. You're bargaining with my life? I am bargaining with all of ours, she replied. Matthew watched, stunned, as she held Havelock there, not just with her hand, but with her logic, her understanding of what hunger and anger could build into. He saw then that she wasn't just strong. She was dangerous in a way no man here had yet understood. Havelock's gaze slid to Matthew. And what do you want? Preacher, ledger man. Virgin no more, Matthew swallowed. Clean books. A camp that doesn't starve its own. Wages paid honest. If you stand with us, we'll show them that you were under orders from the company, that you took less than they did. You'll lie for me, Havelock said slowly. That's not a lie, Matthew answered. That's the truth. You skimmed, yes, but they bled you first. Let them carry the heavier blame. Havelock jerked his wrist free. Namusa let go, her fingers opening like a gate. He stepped back, straightening his coat as if it could shield him from what they'd just offered. You're asking me to go against the very men who feed this camp, he said. We're asking you to stand with the ones who keep it alive, Namusa replied. Havelock's eyes flicked to the letter. To the ledger? To the window where voices drifted faint and restless. You tell them without me, he said. I die. You tell them with me. I might still die. But I might not. He looked at Matthew. You sure of your sums? Matthew nodded. I am. And you? Havelock asked, turning to Namusa. You sure these men will listen to a giant woman and a broken preacher? She smiled, small and sharp. I am sure they will listen to the truth when hunger has sharpened their ears. Havelock let out a harsh laugh. God help us all. He grabbed the ledger, not to burn it, but to hold it open in his hands. Tonight, he said, after supper, in the bunkhouse, we tell them together. If this camp burns, it burns with all of us inside. Matthew's mouth went dry. Namusa's eyes met his, steady and fierce. Tonight, she agreed. The day crawled toward dusk with the slow, grinding inevitability of ice breaking. Men worked unaware, their jokes brittle, their curses tired. The smell of boiled beans drifted from the mess cabin, thin and unsatisfying. As the light faded, Matthew felt his hands grow cold despite his gloves. He remembered pulpits and pews from his youth, crowds staring up, waiting for words to tell them what they already suspected about themselves. This would be different, raw, dangerous. He remembered Doyle's threat at the first camp. "You just bought her trouble, boy." Maybe this was it. The bunkhouse filled with bodies and steam. Wet wool and smoke, sweat and fatigue. Men crowded the bunks and benches, some standing in the aisles, arms crossed. Havelock stood near the stove, the ledger under one arm, the company letter in his hand. Matthew stood beside him. Namusa stood at Matthew's side, the three of them a strange, fragile alliance against the weight of habit and hunger. Kemp lounged at the back, eyes bright with anticipation. "So," he drawled, "what sermon you got for us, preacher?" Havelock lifted the letter. His voice when he spoke was rough but clear. "Company sent us blessings," he said. "Blessings and cuts. No bonus, less supplies. More taken from what you earn." Murmurs rippled, sour and familiar. They'd heard this before. "This time," Havelock continued, "there's more. Thorne's been keeping the books, properly, not the way I used to do. He's found discrepancies." Matthew stepped forward, heartbeat in his throat. He opened the ledger. Pages rustled like dry leaves. "Some of you can't read," he said, voice carrying more surely than he felt. "But you can count. You know what a day's work is worth. You know what a broken back costs." He began to read the numbers aloud. Names, days, logged. Wages promised, deductions taken. Each line a small theft. Each total proof that the men were being eaten from the inside out. Silence gathered, heavy and hot. The stove popped. Snow slid from the roof with a soft thud. Namusa spoke into that silence. Her voice was low, steady, each word landing like a hammer. "They are stealing from you," she said. "Not just the company far away. Here, in this camp. From your pockets. From your families. From your children if you have them. From the women who wait for money that never comes." Eyes sharpened. Shoulders tensed. A low growl of anger began to build. Kemp pushed off the wall, face flushed. "So what?" he snapped. "We always knew the company took its bite. Cost of living." "Nothing's free. This is more than a bite," Matthew said. "This is a feast. And what of him?" Kemp jabbed a finger at Havelock. "You telling me he's innocent?" Havelock opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. For a moment, fear flickered naked in his eyes. Then he squared his shoulders. "I took my cut," he admitted. "I won't lie. I padded the books, kept some back, but not like them, not like the company. I took to keep this place running when they cut supplies. I took to buy medicine, whiskey, things that kept you from killing each other when the cold got into your bones. And to line your pockets," Kemp sneered. Havelock's jaw tightened. "Yes, and that. I won't pretend otherwise. I'm no saint. But I've been bled too. They're squeezing me same as you." Matthew held up the ledger. "If we burn these pages, nothing changes. If we keep them hidden, we're complicit. But if we send a copy south to other camps, to men who might be thinking of working here, they'll blackball you," Kemp spat. "They'll mark you troublemakers. No one will hire you again." Namusa stepped forward, eyes burning. "They already treat you like beasts," she said. "They already feed you just enough to keep you swinging your axes. How much worse can it become?" A voice from the bunks, old and cracked, spoke up. "Worse is no work at all," another answered, younger and sharper. "Worse is dying here and leaving nothing behind." The room split along that line. Fear and rage wrestled in the smoky air. "Listen," Matthew said, raising his voice. "No one is saying we burn this camp tonight. No one is telling you to pick up your tools and swing them at each other." Kemp's eyes glittered. "Not yet. We're saying we demand a different share," Matthew pressed on. "We send our own ledger south. We show them what we know. We tell them we won't sign on next season unless they change the terms. Unless they send someone who answers to more than ink on paper. And if they say no," someone called, "then we talk to other camps," Namusa said. "Other men. We share these numbers. Let them see what waits for them here. The company will find its beds empty come autumn." Silence deepened. Men shifted, thinking of distant families, of the thin line between loyalty and necessity. Kemp stepped into the center of the room, shoulders squared. "You're asking us to trust a foreign giant and a godless preacher," he said, "to risk what little we have left on the hope that men with softer hands will listen to numbers on paper. Namusa's gaze locked with his. "I am asking you," she said, "if you are content to die slowly for men who would not remember your names." Her voice thickened, a faint tremor breaking through. "I have seen villages burned because they waited too long to say no. I have seen men who thought silence would save them. It did not. It only fed the fire." Matthew felt the room lean toward her words. He watched as men who had laughed at her behind her back now saw not just her size, but the history she carried. "I am starving," she said quietly, "not just for a man or warmth or touch, for justice, for a life where what I give is returned in something other than pain." "Are you not hungry too?" A murmur answered her. Not words yet, just a sound like wind shifting direction. Kemp looked around, seeing the change. Panic flared briefly in his eyes. "You stir them up," he accused. "You come up here from nowhere with stories of foreign wars, and you stir up trouble in a camp that survived just fine without you." Namusa's jaw clenched. "Did you survive?" she asked softly. "Or did you just not die?" It was a small question. It landed like a blow. Matthew saw it in their faces, the slow recognition that there was a difference between breathing and living, between laboring and being valued. Havelock slammed the ledger shut. The crack echoed. "We vote," he said, surprising them all. "Right now, hands. You want to send the numbers south to demand better terms, you raise them. You want to burn this book and keep your heads down, you keep them in your pockets. Either way, we all own this choice. Together." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then an older man near the stove lifted his hand. Scarred fingers, knuckles gnarled. His face was lined with too many winters. "I lost a son out here," he said hoarsely. "Fell under a load 3 years back. They sent me his boots and $2. $2 for a boy who swung a saw since he was 12. I'm done keeping my head down." I raised my hand. Another. Hesitant at first, then more confident. Matthew watched, throat tight. Namusa stood very still beside him, her big hands hanging at her sides. Kemp hesitated. Men around him glanced his way. He saw the shift in the air, the direction of the river turning. He lifted his hand, last, jaw clenched. "You'll get us all killed," he muttered. "But I'll be damned if I'm the only coward among you," Havelock counted, nodding slowly. "It's done then," he said. "We send the ledger. We make our demands. And if the company sends men with guns instead of letters?" Kemp asked. Namusa's gaze was hard. "Then we decide what we truly fear," she said. "Dying on our feet or living forever on our knees." The meeting broke apart in a wave of low voices. Men drifted out into the cold, heads bowed, thinking hard. Matthew stayed where he was, hands braced against the table, breathing in the smoke and sweat and fear left behind. Namusa touched his arm. "You stood," she said softly. "You did not hide?" He looked at her, bewildered and a little dazed. "I don't know what we just set in motion. Change," she said simply, "or disaster. Often they walk together," he almost laughed. "You still starving?" Her eyes warmed. "More than ever. For justice? For everything." Silence settled between them, not empty, but full of everything they hadn't yet dared name. The bunkhouse was nearly empty now. Only the stove glowed, a tired red eye in the dim. "I don't know how to love a woman like you," he said suddenly, the words surprising him as much as her. "I don't know if I can be as brave as you deserve." She stepped closer until he could feel the heat of her body through her coat. "You don't need to be brave all the time," she murmured. "Just honest, just present, just willing to stand when it would be easier to kneel," he swallowed. "I can try," she nodded, her face inches from his now. "Then, that is enough." Her hand rose, fingers tracing the line of his jaw, rough with stubble. His breath caught. When she kissed him this time, it wasn't only hunger. It was a promise, a claim, a question and an answer, both. The stove crackled softly. Snow pressed against the walls. Somewhere outside, the river groaned under ice, sensing the coming thaw. Inside, in the dim heat and worn wood of the bunkhouse, two people who had lost nearly everything allowed themselves at last to want more than survival, to want each other. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and comment what country you're watching from. See you in the next one.